we are talking about crunching numbers. There are first market research results that we are going to see in this first panel. They are brand new. Because what's really a burning question for many in the tourism industry, how can we continue? What will be development for the next years? How has consumer behavior changed?
So this is the first panel, and I'm very happy to introduce 3 experts, and they will give us very up-to-date insights into market research analysis. So we have got Ulf Sonntag. He's a project head at the Institute for Tourism. So he is in charge of the Research Association of Urlaub und Reisen, Travel and Journey, traveling. So, and his statement is Germans want to travel whenever they can. Then we have got Roland Gassner, business director with travel data and analytics. Before that, he worked for over 20 years with GfK as an expert for tourism, and he's been working with TDA over a number of years. And he says the new normal means for tourism that people book whatever they can. And then we have got Peter Kautz from Statista with us today. And I can tell you, Mr. Kautz is looking at individual questions of customers, and he says COVID-19 is not the end of tourism industry, but nothing will be as it was before. So we would like to start with Ulf Sonntag's presentation. The floor is yours, Mr. Sonntag. Well, now that I can finally hear you and can see you, that you will also be able to hear me and see me. I hope you can see my screen as well. I can see it quite well. So I'll be bringing you results from our survey of September of this year in the context of Travel Analysis 2021.
Eigentlich in den letzten Monaten natürlich intensiv mit dem Corona-Thema beschäftigt haben. Das Ganze einzuordnen, seit 50 Jahren die Nachfrage nach Urlaubs- und Kurzurlaubsreisen auf dem deutschen Markt. Das heißt, a survey on short journeys within Germany. So this would be all journeys with one overnight stay or more within Germany, but also abroad. And this is also domestic outgoing and the general idea what people want to get out of their journeys, of their traveling. And this is representative for the whole population of Germany. And so we carried out 17,000 interviews, half of them face-to-face personally, and the rest online. And we have carried out many more questions, or we've asked so many more people as an exclusive Corona survey. We started doing that in May 2020, but we also took some information from the month before Corona, so November 2019. So the thesis you mentioned before, that Germans want to travel, yes. So we have got a question where we ask people, do you believe that you have got enough money to be able to travel in the near future? Do you believe that you have got enough time to travel in the near future? And do you feel like traveling at all? These are 3 questions, and the results give you quite a positive idea. So if you look at the green bars, you see that now, well, in September we were nearly on the same level as we saw last November, when Corona wasn't a topic at all. And the November figures last year were excellent over time. So people believe again that they have got the money, that they have got the time, and if you look at their desire to travel, I mean, that had really dropped in May and July. now they also have the desire to travel again. So that's a very positive basic precondition, which so it's really comparable to a normal good year. On the other hand, there are 10% who said, I don't want to travel at all until there's a vaccine. So we went a lot into depth. I don't have the time to show all of those answers, but with many people, there are very concrete travel plans for this winter and the next summer, always with keeping at the back of their heads that people are aware that maybe they cannot travel the way they would like, but if they can, they would like to do this. If they can, they would just travel as they have always done. There's a slight preference for car traveling. There is an interest in restorative journeys, in walking nature, and there is no negative reaction of the general public to certain sites who have been criticized for negative corona performance, and people see this as an opportunity for sustainability. So people are very much aware that things have changed due to corona, so that there will be new requirements due to corona. And as compared to our May service, we see that in September people said, yeah, it's important that it should be hygienic at the location of travel, that you have not so much contact with people whom you don't know, that there are not so many corona infections, that I can easily travel back home. So there's a certain preference for people rather to travel with your own car, to have your own family department, and that it is helpful if you already know the travel destination, and that maybe you might want to use a travel agent who would look after you in the case of an emergency. So this tour operator, that is a kind of novelty, because in the reality of summer 2020, people were focusing on destinations which people could reach by themselves without a tour operator. This was just due to what was possible at that time. But things have changed since then. And then there are things which the sector or the industry can learn from this, and this is the flexibility. Our customers feel that they now need to show more flexibilities, but they expect this from the sector as well. They want to have their money back guarantee, and they are looking for a rather generous cancellation agreements, and they want to have hygienic measures on the ground, and the fear to get sick in the place of generation, that's not a major concern. The major concern is about, will it even be possible to carry out my journey the way I planned it? So this is what we're seeing right now. The situation is very uncertain. You can only plan at very short notice. We see this very much here in Germany in this autumn holiday situation. Currently we are in German autumn holidays, and the customers are ready to be flexible. And many of them did travel in summer, and they would love to travel now as well. But they also expect the tourism industry to be flexible as well. So they expect more team play between supply and demand. So that people really, or that the tourism sector really shows acts of goodwill in situations where they didn't in the past, and also they expect a high level of information. Now, under this basic precondition, there is a general desire to travel. So we had this basic statement, we want to travel again if it's fun, but actually I think it's wrong, because we asked people about their experiences with the summer, and many said, well, we did feel different, but this different feeling was a positive feeling with many things. We thought, oh my God, with all of this corona regulations, this will be a negative thing. But the dominating feeling was finally leave my own flat, finally seeing something different, finally being on vacation. So that was the dominant feeling. And I think this also gives us an insight into what hopefully will be possible over the next few months.
So this much from me. Thanks a lot. Thanks a lot, Mr. Sonntag. Thanks a lot. So finally leaving your flat, finally traveling again. This much from Mr. Sonntag. Now I would like to ask Roland Gassner for his presentation to give us the TDA insights.
Ja, sehr gerne.
Well, yeah. Very happy to do this. Unfortunately, I don't know whether you hear me. So far, I heard very little of what was said. Never mind. I would like to wish you a very good morning. And despite this very exceptional time, I hope that I can also pass on some positive information, because people book whatever they can. That's what we are saying here. Even in times of COVID, people carry out their bookings, but they need to feel sure and certain. Well, certainly you will also know the tool I'm talking about. And so for many years we have been looking into this destination environment together with Alexandra Weigner. 2 years ago, this instrument was taken over by somebody else, and so they adapted this to a new requirement. So I'm going to show you a few slides on the current situation. So what people really buy on the German or in Germany in the context of tourism. So we see here in our data collection, we see that there is a minus of 75% in weekly new bookings. So what's the current situation?
Okay. So
we have got two curves here. The first curve, the green curve, that were the bookings going down in 2019 as compared to the bookings in 2020. So without going into detail here, we, as the tourism industry, have seen that this was really hard during the lockdown. Then there was new hope in early summer. Then there were travel warnings. Now we see that currently there is a maximum level of insecurity. So we cannot really talk about continuous business development. So we are talking about the COVID effect, which has led to a loss of 75% of weekly bookings. So the summary of the year would be, if we don't have any medical solution, or if policymakers don't find a solution here, then this will remain the new normal. Now, as I say, this is about new bookings, and then certainly there are also cancellations and stuff which are not really reflected in this chart. Now here we have got the current new bookings. They give you a little hope for summer 21. So here we see some short-time bookings. So if you look at calendar week 40, you see that figures are going down, but then they went a little up again after that. And on the other hand, we see that 33% of the journeys are being booked rather long-term for summer next year. So people explicitly book with the hope that things will work out, but they are aware that they might not. And we see that there are very few bookings coming in for the winter season.
this year. So we are seeing only something like 30 to 35% bookings of what we would normally see. So these new bookings as a kind of preview for travel activities for the next few months is something which you could see at a number of destinations, and I believe here you can learn a lot from this graph here for trying to predict the future. So you see we had quite a good start into 2020, very hopeful start into the year, many new bookings, even better than the years before. But then we had Corona and the lockdown phase, and bookings just totally dropped. Then in early summer we had got some new hope, but then there were travel warnings for the Balearic and the Canary Islands. And then over the summer, we still found a kind of success story in this rather volatile market. But then on the other hand, in this phase, people really felt very, very insecure. The graph is going up and down, very volatile. So as a market researcher, I would just say, well, yeah, really volatile year. The interpreter would like to ask the audience to bear with her. It's very difficult for the interpreter to hear what this speaker is saying. So the interpreter is giving her best, but she can't really hear the speaker. So So talking about quarantine, about older people. So excuse me, the interpreter really only hears individual words of what the speaker is saying. So there's not really a lot I can do right now. So the question is, how can you plan being working in the travel industry at all these days?
Und das, obwohl es dann sogar, sieht man da in der Kurve abflachen bei Heraklion mit regionalen Konflikten.
Speaker is mentioning regional conflicts like between Turkey and Greece.
Das dann sich als Effekt noch zu sehen ist. Als konsolidierte Betrachtung über jetzt den ganzen Sommer.
Now here we have got a consolidated overview of the whole summer. Here we've learned that the major travel destination for Germans was Germany. No, Germany was the third biggest destination.
Das hohe Wachstum, dann oben an der Grafik, das hat im Grunde sich viel zu spät.
Greece was the country which has the biggest number of new bookings in September as compared to the previous year.
Natürlich den Top der erdgebundenen Reiseziele, Deutschland, Italien, Österreich, Polen, die sicher, und das ist erstaunlich, auch über den ganzen Reiseveranstaltervertrieb, über den Count im Reisebüro oder im Online-Reiseportal extrem mit gepusht wurden, dadurch Deutschland auch ein
So we've seen some countries which have been pushed: Italy, Austria, Germany, Poland. This is the orange bubble. So the Baltic Sea, the German island of Rügen. This makes for the big blue bubble with Germany. So here, the normal, the travel volume of the last year, of the previous year, has been clearly surpassed.
Was passiert auf der anderen Seite? Wir schauen kurz auf den Quellmarkt, unterstützen nochmal meine These.
Now let's look at the source market. Where do people come from? Where do people book from?
Wenn man aktuell die Meldungen dann liest, dann eben auch vermittelt. Die ostdeutschen Bundesländer stehen noch im normalen.
Eastern German federal states normally make up 14% of new bookings per week.
Und durch tatsächlich geringeres Infektionsgeschehen in den
But because there are lower levels of infection in Eastern Germany, we are seeing more people from Eastern Germany booking new journeys. So people are in a position that they can travel.
Euro ausmacht, aktuell eingebucht wird. Also ein klares Signal an der Stelle.
So this is a clear signal at this point.
Unser Umgang mit der ganzen Thematik, entsprechend das Infektionsgeschehen, dann tatsächlich auch kontrolliert.
Really, the number of the infection level in a certain region will influence how much the people who come from that region will really book new journeys. Now, let me give you some insights. So we've got different scenarios and decisive questions. Will we remain here at the bottom of the value? How will the employment quota develop? And how will the prices within the tourist industry and within the market develop? And here we've got three different scenarios. The green scenario, a second scenario for summer 21. Then we have got scenario number 2 for winter 21-22. And then we've got scenario number 3, which is something which we can't really assess for the future.
Und wenn da noch ein zweiter Lockdown jetzt draufkommen würde, dann wird man vom aus Deutschland.
So it depends very much on the development of the pandemic.
Dann natürlich auch Preise, angebotsproduktseitig entwickelt werden. Ganz zentral und das natürlich vor die Hygienekonzepte, dass Hotelkapazitäten, die
there are different factors here, the hygiene concept.
Dann auch ein Stück weit Preisentwicklungen, Preiseffekt ins Positive, ins Teure haben werden. Das bleibt auf jeden Fall nicht aus. Und dass wir sagen, ein kurzes Szenario, wenn jetzt sehr viel die Medizin zum Bieten, im Sommer 2021.
Once again, the interpreter would like to mention that she can hardly hear anything the speaker is saying, and this is why she is keeping quiet for the time being and is trying to do her best to convey as much information as possible.
Und das Szenario Covid länger wie 2021 als zentrales Thema eigentlich, was die Reisemöglichkeiten anbelangt, ist im Grunde nicht abschätzbar aus der Konsequenz bedeuten würde. Leider keine schöne Perspektive.
So unfortunately, this is not a very beautiful perspective, but yet I hope that you have found my information helpful and interesting. So I wish you all the best and a lot of success, as much as that is possible.
Thanks, Mr. Gassner. Being able to plan, and we should have more confidence, or these are the right keywords. Thanks a lot. And now I pass the floor to Mr. Peter Kautz from Statista, and I'd like to listen to your market research results. My pleasure. Hello. We also addressed this topic, how COVID-19 can influence the entire German industry, and we came up with the conclusion that many things are going to change. And in the future, in the coming years, many things are going to change. However, and in order to come up with a positive first, people will continue to travel, and I share the opinion of the previous speakers. Just briefly, who are we? Statista is one of the leading data portals of the world. We are located in Hamburg, and 900 employees are working there, and we deal with data and facts. And in terms of travel, we look at a global perspective. We have publications, and 700,000 people worldwide are being surveyed on their needs and their expectations. And we also do market outlooks. And there's also one on travel and tourism. And from there, we have some of the data that I'd like to share with you. And we take a look at it. And we keep this in mind, how important the travel industry is and how much it has grown. And that's what I want to share with you, because at the end of the day, it's also a great story. In the last 70 years, up to 1.5 billion hotel nights came on top, which is a factor of 16. That's a huge development. But then we have a global pandemic, and it leads to a reaction of the markets, which hasn't been there before, and it's unprecedented. And there are three aspects. It's the behavior of people, how Mr. Sonntag also phrased it, and it's also transactions and the wish for bookings. We saw great figures from Mr. Gassner, but it's also political restrictions leading to the situation that the sector is restricted and is faced with great uncertainty. And there are also small guiding rails, and we see globally that the travel volume in 2020 from last year, it was 767 billion and was reduced to almost 350 billion. It's a reduction of 55%, and we assumed that we are going to see some loosening of the restrictions, lifting of the restrictions. We finalized the data at the end of or in September, and we thought we were quite optimistic then, and it's going to get better. And our figures may be lower, but it all depends on your wishes and on you, and also on the legislators, what they will put in place. And we have travel advisories, travel warnings, and we have different rules from the government, and this presents to us the largest restriction. And why is this the case, and to what does it lead? I'd like to talk about it now. We have this dip in the volume in the overnight stays, and the number of travelers sharply decline, and then this will recover, but at an aggregated level. It will take up to 2023 so that we achieve the global volume again. You see a figure of 770 billion. And when this will materialize, when you think about how the number of travelers looks like, then it'll take a few more months. In the context of this changing travel conditions, certain capacities will be bought, like in the air segment, and as there's a short capacity, and when there will be an increasing demand, there will be higher prices. So we have the revenues on the one hand and the number of travelers on the right hand side, and there's a small difference. And there's reason for hope, at least for certain segments, and we go from a global perspective to the individual countries. And what I'd like to show you is that there are countries which are called trending countries. Why is that? Because there is an increased intercontinental travel volume, and in blue you see the 10 countries who are most affected, which are most affected, also Germany, and some travel segments were able to benefit during Corona, and they will also benefit in the future. That's our expectation. And if we take a closer look, and if we look at the countries, then next year they probably will recover and have a strong growth. Countries such as Mexico, India, but also China on fourth place where, when it comes to inland airline travel, they are back to 100%. There is this fact that I travel because I want to travel, and we heard it from the previous speakers, but I also do it because it's possible, and therefore there are more domestic flights there in China, for example. And here on this slide, this is the proof, all the blue bars, 10% percentage point, that the domestic, the national travel traffic increased in 2020 compared with 2019. And of course, this is something that we expect, and I think this will continue as in the last months. Some countries are more protectionistic. They think more nationally. Maybe this trend will consolidate and maybe won't go back to 2019. Then we also looked at the development of specific segments, and what's not surprising, there are different strong dips. Briefly, it was mentioned the topic of cruises. They were most affected because of the circumstances. And with quick COVID tests, and it probably can recover, but it needs trust to recover. And hotel didn't have such a big dip. Maybe you don't have to do to cities to take a trip, but you also go into rural areas, and we see that people can satisfy their wish to travel, and they are then located in an area where they have trust in. Online sales will remain a trend. And if I know the preferences or the benefits of a travel agency, I have to be honest. You know, sometimes there are certain things that have nothing to do how good an airline is, how good a destination is, but they are really impacted by how a federal government or a state government or local government apply different rules. And each travel agency has more difficulties with offline booking. And then online bookings, of course, they have a time advantage and they can react more quickly. And then the consumer behavior is going to change, and therefore we see a larger annual growth rate, which is abbreviated with CAGR. And last but not least, and then I leave you to it with my presentation, and we see there's a different kind of impact if I look at the development of the entire travel industry and individual parts of tourism. You can also call it a luxury. There's some countries where this is a bigger topic, and you can see that sales expectation are quite diverging, especially if I look at countries, China, for example, with almost double as high a rate. And if I look at Germany, in this segment, we expect a significantly greater growth. And this leads me to my final forecast at the end of the day. We will have a substantial change which we are observing at the moment. There will be sectors, there will be areas and types of tourism which may also benefit from this situation. And we are really excited what the expectations are, and we are looking forward to the discussion. Well, thanks a lot. Great insights that we got from you, really up-to-date insights. Thanks to the gentlemen, especially to Mr. Sonntag and Mr. Kautz. I'd like to start with the discussion. We do not have a lot of time, and therefore I'd like to ask some questions from the audience. One question is to Mr. Sonntag, and that is, what are the most important factors to win back trust amongst customers? Mr. Sonntag. Well, as you just heard, the problem is not really the industry and it's not the customer, but it's the framework conditions stipulated by politics. And as they change constantly, it's hard to win back trust. And I do not want to swap places with a politician who has to create those rules, but this constant stop and go, and how should we treat return travelers from risk areas from abroad and from within Germany? And how are the lists of the risk areas put up? Nobody really understood it. Sometimes every 2 days there's a new list. Sometimes it's every 2 weeks. You cannot plan 2 weeks ahead. And I think the problem are those framework conditions which make traveling difficult. I think the travel industry as such, there is a healthy kind of trust, and of course some are quite affected by the cancellation conditions where not everything went well, but there's not a loss of trust, but the problem is the framework conditions which we as the consumers and as the sector cannot really influence. Yes, and there's a second question to Mr. Gassner from the audience. We all agree that this crisis is and was unique. And the question from the audience, do you see parallels to the previous crisis, Mr. Gassner? Honestly, at the start phase, yes. The drop is comparable to 9/11 or to the financial crisis, but what is the dramatic difference is to stay at this low level and this uncertainty amongst consumers. And in the rest of the world, in China it looks different. You don't know how with democratic means you can better deal with it in a federalist state or country. And that was different with the other crises. And of course, you used communication, we can do it will go up, and then the trust returned during the last crisis. Yeah, thanks a lot. And I have a question to Mr. Kautz. It was interesting to hear that the cruise sector and package tour suffered the highest loss in revenues. And the question is, what the shipping companies need to do in order to stabilize the situation, Mr. Kautz? Well, at the end of the day, it's really about to generate trust. How can I achieve this? Trust is something, I have to give people the feeling that they feel comfortable in the moment, and should anything happen, and that's like the bigger problem, if anything should happen in this uncertain case which creates fear, I then should manage to provide help to people. And cruises suffered a lot. Sometimes they couldn't even go to a port. And it has to do with the framework conditions, with the political framework conditions. If there's a pandemic situation, then you cannot go to a port and it will be difficult. And maybe cruise ships will say, okay, I take routes that I know really well, where I know the local authorities and how they will react. And that's point one, and that's in dire straits. And the second point is we can generate trust as soon as the individual infections can be more manageable. And certainty if somebody suffers from corona or not. And we need to have a reliable, quick test that's affordable. And for example, with the cruise ship, you need before getting on board. And so you know that I don't have it, and neither does anyone have it on the ship, and that you have this reliable information. And if I achieve this situation, then I have the right framework conditions, the right idea, and you can sit together at the table without feeling uncomfortable. And that's an idea for cruise ships, but maybe also for airline travel. And that's their expectations. They need to wait for that. Yeah.
Well, thanks a lot for these insights. Now I would like to draw our discussion to the next point, to the next panel, actually. So thanks a lot to Mr. Sonntag, Mr. Kautz and Mr. Gassner for all of these very interesting insights. Has been very helpful, and I'm very sure that we've learned what we've learned with you. We will be building on in the future.